Welcome back to Light the Fuse. We are still lighting fuses. Charles, can you believe it?
Not really.
Sometimes I just think, what the fuck are we still doing this for? You know? I'm gonna be honest with you, Charles.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
But sometimes I wake up and think, God damn, we're still fucking doing this show?
I feel like there's something that's addictive about it, I guess. I don't know. It's a compulsion. I mean, the fact that we've done it every week with no breaks. I mean, I know sometimes we can sort of stockpile episodes and give ourselves kind of a month off a little bit, but we're still doing Patreon episodes every week as well. I mean, we're working our butts off. So I hope you all out there are enjoying it as much as we aren't.
Yeah, I hope the enjoyment level is equal to the amount of pain that we go through every week.
It's fun. We wouldn't be doing it if we weren't having fun. We're loving this with all of you.
Yes.
And we're loving our all our Patreon followers. You should definitely check out our Patreon, as we say every week. But seriously, consider it patreon.com/lightthefuse because we do bonus episodes there every week. But this week we've got Evan Schiff back. The associate editor and assistant editor on Ghost Protocol, and editor of John Wick 2, editor of John Wick 3, and editor of the forthcoming John Wicks 4 and 5. It was awesome to talk to Evan about John Wick, which we get into this week, and we'll have a fun announcement after the interview is over on the back end of this episode. We'll tell you about some stuff we got planned coming up. But for now, I wanted to set up a couple things in this episode. One, the birds of prey of it all. We kind of, again, we had technical difficulties on this episode, and so a couple things were a little janky. I was in my car for part of it, and so if you hear Drew reference that
Charles
at one point, he says...
Charles has been living in his car for the past 6 months now.
I was in my car for part of this interview, and then at a certain point when you guys couldn't hear me anymore, which our editor Luke did some magic to cut out all of that malarkey. And when that happened, I hopped in my car. I turned on the car and drove back to a spot where I was then able to get internet. Because the whole problem was that I didn't have internet at the place where I'm staying at that time because it had gone down. But then it came back up. So I drove to the spot, turned on the internet, and then you'll hear Drew at the end say something like, "Charles, go back to your car." So that's what that's in reference to. But what I was going to say is... the Birds of Prey of it all, I think we had to make a couple edits there. So the director of Birds of Prey has been pretty vocal about some things that have happened in the post-production. Right? She tweeted something about it. Is that what happened?
Yeah, I think she's Kathy Yan has been sort of in the conversation after the sort of Snyder Cut movement. I think that she and David Ayer have kind of said, "Oh yeah, we'd love to have our cut of our DC movies." So it sounds like.
I mean, we've heard before that, because Chad Stahelski, the director of the John Wick movies, I don't know what his official credit on the movie is, but what we've heard before is that he came on to the movie to help out shoot some action. I don't know what the public version of that was, and I don't know what the private version of that was. We tried to ask Evan about it a little bit, and he obviously is reluctant to talk too much about it, but he came onto the project with Chad, and so we talked to him about that a little bit, and... I don't know if we'll ever get any greater answers, but you'll hear Evan talk a little bit about it here.
In 10 years, we'll get something. But
right.
He's got a lot of great stuff about Wick and Tom Cruise and Mission Impossible and At the Mountains of Madness. Hello. Amazing.
Oh, yeah.
We'll be back afterwards to kind of wrap things up. You worked for Guillermo del Toro. He's one of our favorites. I just watched Crimson Peak again last night with my wife.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, great movie. But what was that? I mean, he is an amazing human being. And what was that experience like?
I love Guillermo. Guillermo's awesome. I did 2 movies with him. The first one was Pan's Labyrinth.
Oh, I love that movie so much.
It was, on that one I was working as a post PA. So my brief career arc, I worked at Stan Winston Studio during college for 5 years.
Oh, wow.
And that's how I got into the union. I acquired some visual effects editor credits. They let me into the union as an assistant editor. But I realized, that there was only so high I could go on the ladder at Stin Winston's because they were a visual effects vendor, and I wanted to be on the production side of things. So I left and sort of had trouble breaking into the assistant editor world. I took a post-PA job. I didn't like it very much. And I started looking for, a way out. And I just randomly got an email one day addressed to me and like 15 other assistant editors that I didn't know from a guy I didn't know. And the email was like, we're looking for a Spanish-speaking assistant editor to jump onto Guillermo del Toro's next movie. They're like shooting in Spain, they're about to wrap, and they're going to come and edit in LA. And so I, immediately replied to that. And like, I studied abroad in Spain twice in college. So like I speak passably. I certainly don't speak fluently, but well enough. And I went in for the first round interview, made it past that, and then went in the second round interview with Bernat. I was the third person they interviewed that day. The first person didn't speak Spanish. The second person didn't bring their resume. And so when I walked in, Guillermo's assistant told me, unless you really, really screw this up, this job is yours. And the interview was in Spanish, which then turned out to be sort of one of the last times that I was actually speaking Spanish in that house. Because Bernat was the first day that I showed up for work. Bernat was like, I'm here in the US. I want to practice my English. So it's great that you speak Spanish, but we're going to be speaking English to each other. And I was like, okay. And then there was but during the like finishing part of the movie, our negative was in Barcelona, our sound crew was in Mexico City. So there was a lot of like speaking Spanish over the phone that was required, but like in the little house in Woodland Hills where we cut the movie on a single Avid too. So it was just, Bernat would cut and then he would get off and then I would do my assistant editor things and then we'd switch and Guillermo would come in and, the reason I got to sit in the room so much for that is because there was only one Avid there. And so, I got to know Bernat and Guillermo and actually to some extent, Iñarritu and Cuarón also, because we had 2 days where Alejandro Iñarritu came and like helped us cut 10 minutes out of the movie at the end. Wow. And so, I was like, I must have been 23, I think, at the time, and was just, my everyday reporting to work was just, an amazing experience. And I think
what did they cut out of the movie? What do you remember what that 10 minutes was?
A lot of it was nips and tucks.
Okay.
I don't remember like if there was a specific scene that we cut out. I know that when I first started, they had a good cut already, and Guillermo asked me if there's any wholesale things I would take out of the film, and I think I suggested cutting down some of the like Captain shaving, and then that stayed in. Guillermo was like, thanks, but no thanks. And yeah, most of that 10 minutes was air and finding ways to accomplish the same result with less screen time. As I was saying, like talking about earlier, with every show and every editor you pick up something from, like that's, from that show is definitely an introduction into like, okay, how can we do this more efficiently without actually losing emotion, without losing pacing, while keeping everybody engaged. And, so there are cuts in the movie that I can still point to and be like, oh, I suggested that. Like that was, that was like my 2 a.m. suggestion on the first night with Alejandro in the room. Yeah. And then at some point they sent Bernat back to, like, we sort of locked picture, but we still have months of visual effects left to do. So they sent Bernat back to Barcelona. And they moved us to the Sherman Oaks Galleria, but then I spent the next 3 months just one-on-one with Guillermo cutting visual effects shots in, until we had sort of hit a critical mass, and then Bernat came back for the final little bit, and the mix was in Mexico City, which I got to go down for, which is cool.
It's amazing that Iñarritu was suggesting things to be made shorter. That's...
Well, I mean, those guys are always they are so critical in the best possible way of each other's movies.
Right.
That it was a help, right? For sure. I think we went from slightly over 2 hours to an hour or 51 or something like that. And
then you were on Golden Army right after.
Then I was on Golden Army right after. There was there was a time at the end of Pan's Labyrinth when I knew that Guillermo was going to do Golden Army, but like hadn't, and I had asked Bernat, and then like, oh, Bernat, let's go do Golden Army. And so I had like an awkward lunch where I was like, Guillermo, I'd really love to do Golden Army with you. And there was this like awkward silence, and he was like, okay, yeah, we'll think about it, But then a couple months after that, I got an email from him to the post supervisor that was like, that basically listed 3 people that were, non-negotiable hires on his movie. And it was the editor, the sound designer, and me.
Wow.
So that was pretty great. That was a 13-month overseas job. So it was 7 months in Budapest and 6 months in London.
Wow. Completely different than Pan's Labyrinth.
Yeah, completely different. And and still equally as sort of as crazy and chaotic at the end. They, Universal moved our release date forward a month, so what was already like a short post schedule got even shorter. But the great thing about working in London is that everything is right there in Soho. So like our DI facility was walking distance from our sound mixing, which was walking distance from our our VFX vendor, which was DNEG, and our editorial offices are right in the center of that. So that was like, they put me up in an apartment in Mayfair, and I had a 20-minute walk into Soho. And, again, it's like living that life is an experience that, you don't forget.
Right.
It's just, it's so fun.
Did Guillermo ever tell you what he wanted to do for Haunted Mansion?
Not specifically.
Okay.
I knew that like Haunted Mansion was something he was interested in. While we were doing Pan's Labyrinth, there were maquettes of At the Mountains of Madness that were like lying around the house. And I definitely was like, it hurt that day that like that project officially died.
That was going to be Tom Cruise too, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was. Yeah, it was.
Oh God. No one attaches himself to more projects that never get made than Guillermo del Toro. I will say that.
Well, and then at the end of Hellboy 2, it was sort of a similar thing. He came in and he was like, let's go to New Zealand. And, Bernat and I were like, sure. And, and then that happened.
Did you work on it at all?
No, not at all.
No, okay.
Yeah.
There's that great New Yorker article, I don't know if you remember that, where they kind of like describe what his version was going to be and everything. It just sounded so cool. Like what that...
I'll have to go hunt that down. I didn't read that, but I was looking forward to it. Like it's, as like a freelancer coming back from Hellboy 2 with an eye on The Hobbit, it's like, there's conflicting advice that people give you.
Right.
Which is like, how much should you really say no to things or adjust your life for a job that doesn't exist yet?
Right.
Because a job only exists when you've signed the contract. And so with that in mind, I tried to structure, our life because at, that point I was living with my now wife, and, we were like trying, she was a freelancer also for like doing web development. And so we had some flexibility to like up and move if the opportunity came, but we still had to like wait potentially a year or 2 years or whatever before that would happen. I didn't turn down anything that I regret, but there are definitely like, it was sort of tricky being like, how much can I, should I really be counting on this job to actually happen? And, in the end, I'm glad that I didn't turn down anything, including Ghost Protocol that
right. That's right. You wouldn't have been able to do that.
Yeah.
I think we're in the clear here. We can talk about a movie that came out earlier this year that people love, Birds of Prey. Mm-hmm. But Kathy has said some things on Twitter recently about her struggles with the studio and getting her cut and all that. Can you illuminate that at all?
Probably not.
Okay. But you had a good time on the movie, I'm assuming?
Yeah, I had a good time on the movie. I just think that with all of these movies, they're hard. Like, very few directors these days have final cut, which means that there's a lot of feedback that has to be taken into account from all sides, from the producer side, from the studio side, from the director side, obviously, from the like your star side, who's also a producer in the film. So like these movies are hard, and not everybody gets what they want. But I think that the proof is in the end product, and people seem to really like the movie.
Yeah.
So,
Can you answer, were you there from the beginning?
No.
Or were you there, did you come in later?
I came in with Chad.
Oh, you came in with Chad. Okay.
Yeah, I came in with Chad. And then, again, because these movies are the way that they are, and we were approaching having to finish, the time we have to finish the movie, they asked me to stay on. And so I stayed on to the end of the film.
Cool.
I wanted to go back to real quick to the, like, you were asking me about Wick earlier.
Yes.
And I've just been thinking about that. And I think that like that one of the things which I don't think I hadn't really put actual thought to it until now. But the way that we cut the Wick movies, I feel like is similar to a lot of the taste and style and strategy that Paul applies to his cuts, in that we are like, when I'm cutting a fight, I'm always trying to find that cut point that is in between a beat, and I know Paul mentions this in his book, and I think he mentioned it, in the interview with you guys, but like the way that he tackles, even just a simple thing of like the establishing shots in Ghost Protocol that are like not quite on the beat, of the music, like that is, I think that's a thing that goes by relatively unnoticed, but has a bigger impact than a lot of people realize. Because one of the things that lets you do, and one of the things that I think allows in the Wick movies for the fights to feel as, seamless and fluid as they are, is that when you put edits like on the beat or like in a fight on the impact, you're drawing attention to that. You're saying, I'm putting an edit right here. Look at this edit. And when you are not, when you're trying to find the little like silent moments in between, what I'd been calling them sort of the pivot points, then that allows you to present a scene in a way that is where the editing is more invisible to the audience members. And especially now when editing is becoming, an art that more and more people have a knowledge and appreciation of through, the thousands of people that are, cutting their own YouTube videos and TikToks and things like that. I think that people are becoming more aware of what we do and are watching it more. And, I think I definitely picked up from Paul a little bit of the sensibility of, let me not be so overt in how, and where I place my edits, and find those little breaths, those little like micro moments where an action, you're between the end of one action and the beginning of another, and you can put a cut point without actually interrupting, the action itself.
Right. He talks so much in the book about coming into a scene late and leaving early.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's kind of the same methodology you're applying.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. We get in trouble in the Wick movies. We get in trouble because we have hours and hours of footage of John Wick walking into and out of places. And inevitably it all gets cut out. But like the first, the John Wick 2 first assembly was like, 5 minutes of John Wick walking into downtown Manhattan from his house.
Right.
So that entering late and leaving early is definitely good advice. But the first cuts don't always reflect that.
Are the pressures there now sort of that this movie has become a franchise in a way that, either you've got to try to top it next time or there's a certain style that people are used to? I mean, does that come into play now that you've done 2 of these? And the first one is a sequel to a popular original.
Yeah. With one, they'll Chad and Dave will tell you they did not expect that there would ever be a 2, and then so we went into 2, and I think we knew on the creative side that like this is a popular franchise. We have a huge fan base. If you're on Twitter, you see people, talking about it constantly, referencing it constantly. Like Lin-Manuel Miranda is a huge John Wick fan. And
gotta get him into 4. Gotta get him in there.
After we had left New York for shooting 3, I found myself in a Twitter exchange with him, and he's like, "If you're in New York, I want to come down to the set." And I'm like, "Oh, we like just left like last month." But like with Wick 2, it wasn't like people sort of assume that these franchises, like these are proven franchises, and that they have like the full backing of the studio and everybody who's responsible for marketing them, and that's not always the case. And with Wick 2, we struggled. Like I think there had been a narrative that was developing, in the in the studio hallways or whatever, that we were a problem movie. And so at times it was hard to get approvals for visual effects money. There was just a lot of questioning of is this movie going to be a hit or not? And and then we had a preview screening, and it was a 300 seat theater, and there were 600 people lined up. And so, and then at that point it was like, okay, yeah, obviously there is a huge appetite for this movie, and and our road got easier from there. And then, but still, it's like when you go to market the movie, they have all these spreadsheets for like how much money they should put into the marketing and how wide of a release they should do, and the John Wick 2 box office beat the upper projections from those spreadsheets by 50%.
Wow.
So then you're like, okay, immediately, like John Wick 3, like greenlit on, literally the following Monday, and then a year and change later, whatever, we find ourselves shooting John Wick 3. And then amazingly, again, it's like I've never seen these spreadsheets, but you just hear about them that like, statistically, the third movie in a trilogy always performs worse than the first two. That's the like, that's the mantra that they tell you, or what the data, says or whatever. So then you're fighting like, okay, now maybe we don't have as many resources as we would like, because the spreadsheet says that the third movie in a trilogy doesn't make as money as the first two. So they don't want to put money in that they're not going to recoup, but then John Wick 3 doubles the upper estimates for box office, from that spreadsheet on its opening weekend too. And so there is a lot of pressure to perform when you're making these movies, and you don't always have everything that you need in order to do them.
Right.
But then you have a good preview screening and all of a sudden money appears. So, it's, they sometimes they get challenging from that perspective of convincing people that that this is a good movie, that people are going to like it, that we're doing cool things with the dogs and the knife fight and the horses and things like that. And, I think that one of the things that we all fight on the creative side, is when you are putting these films together, you're obviously seeing all of their flaws right from the beginning. So it's easy to find yourself in a little rut where you only remember the flaws, even if you've cut them out and made it better, where like you don't know what you have in your hands sometimes, because you look at it and all you see is the duct tape and the spit and the glue that you've had to put into place in order to cover up things that weren't working as well, but audiences never see any of that stuff. And so like, the pressure that we feel while making them is sometimes compounded by that feeling of like, oh shoot, we had to like fix this thing and it's going to be obvious to everybody, and then it blows by and nobody notices.
Right.
And, there's one thing that nobody has ever called me out on in John Wick 2, which we were like prepared to like argue for lots of VFX money and everything, which is if you go in John Wick 2, when Santino calls John in his hotel room and says, "Thank you for killing my sister, but now I have to kill the man who killed my sister." And, and then he calls Ruby Rose. He calls the contract center and has the hit put out on John's life. If you look at Santino's outfit during when he first makes the call, and then when he has the rest of the conversation, he is in a completely different location, in a completely different costume, from a completely different scene. But I had the phone pick up in one scene and I had the conversation I needed in another. And so when he picks up the phone to dial the call center, he's in the like Italian National Art Museum, and there's like all these like white, Roman statues, behind him, and he's in this blue room. And then when we cut back to him the next time, he's in the Tao nightclub in New York with a Shiva statue and candles, which is all candle lit on the ground, and there's a pool and everything. And, I thought for sure we would get called out in a preview screening or in like a studio cut or something, and nobody ever said a word. So we just let it slide. But
wow.
That's like, it's like that type of thing where you're like, oh, we're like, this is never going to work. This is never going to work. This is never going to work. And then actually, it works.
As an editor, are you frustrated now because you've had two movies that have ended essentially on cliffhangers, sort of like to be continued ... Are you like, can we fucking end the movie? Resolve it.
That there was some debate when we were finishing Wick 3 about how that scene with Lawrence Fishburne is the last thing. It was like we did a 1-day reshoot to get that scene. It was the last thing that went into the movie.
Really?
And there were still multiple versions of that ending that we tested in order to figure out, like how should the movie end? I think that like as long as Keanu has said this in interviews, that as long as he's able, he wants to keep making these movies, and I think that was part of the reasoning for not just like closing off that story.
Right.
But there were definitely some of us, I would count myself in there, who were like, let's like close out this part of the story.
Right.
And then we can start something else.
Yeah.
Rather than trying to do serial, like a serial arc. But, the most important thing when you're finishing a movie is that the audience walks out with that, like, hell yeah feeling, and that they're like, and, having a scene with Keanu and Lawrence Fishburne, it definitely does that. It accomplishes that. So
yeah, for sure.
So there are other things that we talked about, like, should like John wake up and he's like, in the middle of like a snow-covered plain all by himself, and he's just, you don't know exactly where he is and he's stranded somewhere, and, you just sort of end it there, or, should we go a little bit more like action oriented and be like, I'm going to go get my revenge. That's ultimately where we ended up.
Love it. Well, I can't wait. I'm sure you'll be back for 4 whenever that happens.
I think they restarted shooting The Matrix in Germany now, or they're about to, or something. So, Keanu's got to make it through that, and then we'll see where the pandemic is at that point.
Do you know what the further adventures of John Wick look like?
I have seen a couple things I obviously can't talk about, but I'm excited.
Of course.
Listen, Evan, you're going to talk about him, okay? Right now.
I'm excited.
Okay.
And I know that, like, I think these movies are so good because, Chad and Keanu don't want to just make a sequel for making a sequel's sake. They, before they jump into shooting, a first frame of film, they want to know that they have something that is, new and different and worth making. And so, like, they really do put a lot of, thought and effort and discussion into, like, what can we do that will not only make audiences happy, but make us happy?
Right.
How can we want to be satisfied as filmmakers? So they take that very seriously. And I don't know if you've ever talked with Keanu, but he's a very thoughtful guy. So I can just imagine the conversations that they're having right now, because I've had half-an-hour conversations with Keanu about, one particular moment in the John Wick film and what does it mean for John's character.
Yeah. I mean, I've talked to a bunch of actors, obviously, as a journalist, and I don't think I've ever talked to anybody, especially not somebody of that stature, who cares so much about, like, giving people their $20 worth. He is so inherently aware that people are paying for babysitters and they bought a $7 Coke, and, like, he really wants to give that to them, and it's just so refreshing. And he's totally guileless, and it lacks all cynicism. It's really amazing.
It's kind of similar to Cruz, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Tom and Keanu are similar in a lot of ways. One thing that Keanu does on the press tour and on the, like, premiere junket is that he and Chad sit through every single screening in every city that they go to, and that's, like, Chad's talked to me about that before, where, I think on the first John Wick, he was, they were like, well, should we, like, go grab a drink or something while the audience is watching? And Keanu's like, nope, got to sit through all the screenings, the good ones, the bad ones, sit through them all.
That's awesome.
And,
wow.
It's, like, important to him to, like, be there and, represent the film that he's made.
Did you have any interaction with Cruz while you're doing Ghost Protocol?
Well, I had that, the like, night in Pittsburgh.
Right.
And then, he would come into Bad Robot. I had, like, a day when I was cutting, when Paul was out, and I was cutting with him and Brad and Berkey. I went to his house at 3:30 in the morning one night, and his security guards were very suspicious of me. I had to like, we had loaded up an iPad with a movie on it for him to take on a plane the next day. But the, like,
was
file,
that a cut of the movie?
Yeah, it was a cut of the movie, and the file wasn't ready until, like, 2 a.m. or something like that.
Right.
So they, like, sent me his address and said, just, like, hand it to the security guards. But yeah, here I am at 3:30 in the morning, and in front of Tom's Gates, which has 1,000 cameras on it, and ringing the doorbell, and the security guard comes out and is like, "Who are you?"
That is amazing.
I'm trying to think if there was any other, like, good Cruise stories. I think those are definitely the, like, the most, like, one-on-one moments. That Pittsburgh trip is one that's going to stick in my head for a while.
Right. And well, you said about Keanu, that you could have a half-hour conversation with him about one moment for John Wick. So is he in the edit room, like, working with you at all, like, as well, like, and talking about stuff, or how does that work with him?
Yeah, I mean, he and Chad are friends, going back to when Chad was his double on The Matrix. So,
right.
So he comes in, every 3 or 4 weeks, and we'll watch a version of the movie and he'll give his thoughts on it. We'll go like sit outside and have a scotch, and like chat. It's great. Sometimes people walk, but we've been cutting the same place in Santa Monica, and it's a little just like, strip mall office park. So like we'll go sit on these like picnic tables outside, and there's other businesses in there, and people like walk by, and you can see the double take. It's like, is that Keanu Reeves like drinking scotch outside on a picnic bench? But yeah, so he's there a lot, and sometimes like he'll leave, and then you'll get an email from him a couple hours later that's like, about some, following up on something that you talked about. It's like, I really think that we should go this way, or like I really disagree about this other thing, and like, he's definitely like he thinks a lot about what the movie should be and what John Wick's character should be, and like what's important. So yeah, he's there. He's not really there for the like nitty gritty. Like he's not in my room being like, can you add 6 frames to this shot?
Right.
He's not really, those concerns are too small for him. He's mostly like, looking at big picture story arc things.
Last time I saw Keanu was last summer at the premiere of Toy Story 4, and we were at the bar at the same time, and I said, "You were just great." And he was like, "Oh, really?" And that was it. Keanu,
yeah.
We love you.
Yeah. Yeah, he's for when we were in Rome for John Wick 2, my older daughter was just 4 months old at the time, and he came. I didn't really know him at that point either, because like we were still shooting that movie, and that was my first movie with them. So, but he came to chat with me and my wife, and the entire time he was just letting my 4-month-old like play with his hand, and she was like grabbing his fingers and moving them around, and it was like one of those moments where like you wish you could have like recorded it in some way,
right? Because
it was just so like casual and so sweet. But then obviously that that would have ruined the moment. So I just made a mental note. I was like, I'm gonna, when my daughter Margot is older, I'll tell her, she's
I wanted to ask you quickly about the fight scenes in John Wick, because they're so expertly, obviously choreographed, and it's the way that they're shot, where you really hold long takes. And I'm curious, because there still are some cuts. I was rewatching a little bit of the first like half hour of John Wick 3 last night, which is just so incredible. God,
that knife fight. That knife fight will be on my demo reel for ages.
So like for instance, the knife fight. There's long takes where they hold for a while, and then but it's not like a oneer. It's just a long take, and then another long take, and another long take. How much are those? Is Chad directing that with like the intention of like, this shot is just for this part of the fight, and then this shot is just for this part of the fight, or is he cover? What is the coverage like there for those fights?
So the coverage is not. The fights are broken down into beats, and the coverage is not all that expansive, because you've got to manage, how often your stunt guys are doing these things, and you don't want to risk injuries by doing things too often. First and foremost, when we're presenting a fight, we want you to know that it's Keanu in the fight, that it's Keanu doing all of the fighting himself, and
right.
And we don't want to even give you the hint that we are trying to hide anything by inserting unnecessary cuts in there, because I think most people are familiar with the like, oh, it's the double and the wide, and then you cut in for the close up, and so it's definitely something that that we're conscious of. I think on John Wick 1, it was actually a little bit of a way to save money, because John Wick 1 was sort of on the upper end of an indie budget, but it was still an indie movie, and they were scrounging, so they figured out that they could get more bang for their buck by having John Wick take down a whole bunch of guys in one long extended take, and Keanu was athletic enough and a good enough martial artist to do that.
Right.
And so, but then that that also became its sort of signature style and what people responded to. So
yeah.
I think it ends up being a trade-off of like, what are the natural breaks in the fight? What is the longest piece that we can go sort of responsibly before we get into something that needs to be either seen from a different angle or had more care performed so that nobody gets injured, And so by the time that I get the footage, a lot of those decisions have already been made about how best to break the fight up.
Right.
And there are definitely, when I'm cutting, I'm definitely looking for how long can I hold something until the shot breaks or until somebody flubs. And like in the knife fight was actually one where there's one 17-second shot of Keanu as the two dudes with hatchets are coming after him. And like, I immediately just put that in there in my, first assembly. And I think if you watch my first assembly, it is roughly what came out in the final film,
right.
except for one little chunk in the snowball fight that we doubled up. But, Chad came in and was like, well, just for fun, like, what if you cut it here, or whatever. And so we did an alt cut where that shot was not quite as long, but it was nowhere near as satisfying because, at a certain point in that shot, you're realizing like, I haven't seen a cut in the past 10 seconds, and this is like a really high energy, intensely choreographed moment. These like hatchets, they're real props. They're obviously not real blades, but like, if they hit you, they'll hurt.
Right.
And so they've got to be on their game to do it. So yeah, I try to, as an editor of these movies, I try to stay out of the way because the impressive thing is not how well I can cut the fight, but how, the training and the preparation that the stuntmen, and Keanu put into like being able to just do all of that choreography in one go like that.
Right. So they kind of already have a general idea of where their cut points are almost while they're staging it, while they're choreographing it.
To a point, yeah. The other thing they do, though, is they do improvise when they show up because they... Chad has his own training facility called 8711 that where all the guys will go to like, work out and train, and they'll set up cardboard boxes that are roughly what they think the set layout might be so that they can sort of make a little maze and figure out, some like general choreography. But when they show up on the day, like maybe there's like a support column that wasn't in, the like dress rehearsal space that they made, or maybe, as they're walking around, they like notice a mirror somewhere and figure, oh, maybe, we should figure out a way to use this. So there's a lot of showing up on the day and modifying the choreography to fit the space.
Okay.
And then, and then between Chad and Dan Lawson, the cinematographer, they figure out, what the angles are they need in order to cover themselves. So yeah, it's a lot of preparation for the ability to improvise, if that makes sense.
And then I haven't seen any of the behind the scenes on this. So when they threw the knives, are they just throwing air? Is it like CGI when they're doing that, or what are they actually throwing something at each other?
There are a couple shots where they're throwing something. There's a couple shots where where like when John's stabbing one of the guys, he's holding a knife handle but no blade. Right. In the snowball fight, which is the section where like all hell breaks loose, and there's two guys on one side and John on the other, and they're just chucking knives back and forth at each other, and John's like throwing like 5 knives, in rapid succession. Then those guys are holding nothing; it's just air. They're just pantomiming. If you haven't seen any of the behind the scenes on that, it's also interesting that there's a lot of broken glass in that fight, and none of that glass is practical. It's all digital glass.
Oh wow. Okay, I'm sure I saw I own the digital copy on Vudu, or it has a whole bunch of featurettes. I just haven't dug into them yet.
Yeah, so
do that.
For safety and speed and cleanup purposes, we didn't want actors actually breaking glass.
Right.
So they also pantomimed the breaking of the glass, and in my first assembly, but long before we had realistic looking knives, we had clip art knives, and so we would just manually animate these clip art knives and then put the sound effects in for like gunshots and glass breaking and things like that. But that was a sequence where just even during production, we knew we had something good on our hands, and we knew that it was working because even in that most basic state where there's no visual effects and like clip art knives, flying around, it was still funny and it still worked. And so that, that was definitely like a good morale booster to be able to show people that during production.
Charles, you can't ask any more questions. We got to save this for Light the Wick. You know what I'm saying?
We've talked about a sub podcast for Light the Wick.
Listen, I want to go full on miniseries Light the Wick main channel in between missions.
Okay. All right, I'll back off. Back
off, Charles. Jesus, go back to your car. All right, we've gone way over, so we have to ask the most important questions. If you've listened to the episodes, you know what's coming, Evan.
I've been dreading it. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Well, first off, we're gonna ask you. This question's gotten a lot of engagement recently online. So, hair rankings. Go.
I think I'm a short hair Tom Cruise.
How short?
Yes.
Are
we talking 1? Are we talking 3? Are we talking Fallout?
I think probably 3 and then 1.
Okay.
And then I don't remember. I don't exactly remember the differences between 3 and 1. Is 3 shorter than 1, or is 1?
1 is the short. 1 is a buzz cut. So
right. Yeah. So I think 3 and then 1.
You want to have something to play with, but not.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
But it was interesting hearing Brad talk about, or maybe you guys were asking Brad, about whether the hair choice in 4 was so that it would blow in the wind when he's outside the Burj, which is not something I'd ever thought about.
Right. I think we've come to the conclusion that it was because he was in that prison for so long, that Russian prison.
Right.
His hair grew out.
His hair grew out. I don't know.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
But it looks, I mean, if he was in prison and growing it out, then another prisoner went to Vidal Sassoon or something, because it is beautifully layered.
Right.
I assume that there's another prisoner who's using a shiv to like shape it for him.
Right.
You know.
But I'm saying that prisoner has to know what he's doing, because that is a beautiful
of course.
Because it looks good. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. All right. Well, more importantly, can you rank all the movies, maybe from your favorite to least favorite? Dealer's choice, but please.
I saw that you were watching Rogue Nation on Twitter last night.
I did my homework for this, so I rewatched Ghost Protocol. I watched Rogue Nation, then I ran out of time. But I can't put 4 in there because it's just, it's hard to rank movies that you've worked on where you intimately know where all of the seams are.
Well, here's a question. McQuarrie has said repeatedly that he was kind of drifting off of 4 for 5. Mm-hmm. When you were rewatching it last night, did you feel that? Did you feel some of the same kind of tempo?
Oh, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I didn't specifically think about it.
Okay.
I do agree with McQuarrie that the Dubai sequence is like almost impossible to beat.
Right.
As a standalone thing, that Dubai is like, that I find that for the movies that I work on, because when you're on them for a year, by the end of it and you've QC'd everything, you really don't want to go back and watch them again. But there are there are chunks of the movie where it's like, oh, I would happily rewatch this again and again.
Yeah.
And Dubai is one of those. But I think you can't beat the original. I remember that so well. I listened to the soundtrack when I was a kid, on repeat.
Yep. Us too.
Rogue Nation is just great. Like I like 5 and 3 probably about the same. Like I think the writing in 3 is really sharp, and there's a lot of fun things that happen in 3. And Philip Seymour Hoffman is obviously I think he's one of my favorite villains. 5 feels so like complete from start to finish, in a really satisfying way. Yeah, 5 quickly sort of ranked up to the top of my list, and then I don't know that I want to rank the others, because I do still want to work in this industry.
So you're giving us a top 3?
I'm going to give you
1, 5, and 3.
I'm going to give you my top 3, but it's cheating because I'm excluding Ghost Protocol since I can't put that in.
Okay.
So you're not a fan of Fallout.
I love every movie in this franchise, and that's one of the great things about it is that we're. By ranking these movies, you're still talking about degrees of separation that are miles ahead of a lot of other movies out there.
Exactly.
So being a movie falling above or below another doesn't mean I don't love it intensely.
Okay.
Right. It's not best to worst. It's best to also great.
To also like I would happily work on any of these movies and be proud of doing it. But yeah, I think when I reach for a DVD, Rogue Nation is right up there.
Do you feel competitive now that you are in the same space as these movies? John Wick versus Mission Impossible?
No, I'm still envious of Eddie. I desperately want Eddie to get maybe because they're making 2 more he will, but I desperately want Eddie to get into a position where he's just like drowning in footage and has no choice but to call me to come help him out. That's my dream. I love the Wick movies, but I would like to work on a movie at some point that my kids will be able to watch sooner rather than later. And the Wick movies, they're great, but like they do have a lot of headshots in them.
Yeah.
So
yeah, quite a bit.
So yeah, no, I would like it's I know Eddie listens to this and I have already expressed this to him offline, but it's definitely my dream to be able to like cut something with Eddie because I just think he's great.
The annoying thing about Eddie is that he's as nice and generous a person as he is talented and creative. So it's just annoying. It's just annoying.
So Drew's just annoyed.
I'm just annoyed. I'm annoyed by Eddie, and he knows it. He'll know it now. No, he's.
And he also cut one of my other favorite movies, which is the first Kingsman.
Yes.
Which is just like there's a few, you know how you have those movies where every year they get a rewatch, you know? It's like sometime during the year you'll throw it on, you know? And so like for me, like the first Kingsman is one of those, the first Pirates is one of those, the Matrix is one of those, you know, it's like that. So yeah, you know,
comfort food.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. The comfort watch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Evan, thank you so much for coming on this podcast and dealing with Charles's bullshit. Now you get a little taste of what I'm up to every week. So, no, it really meant a lot for you to come on the show. And obviously, please keep in touch. And we would love to see you in person when this is all over.
Oh, my God. I know. I would love to leave my house.
Yes, yeah. But yes, thank you so much for accepting this mission. And we'll talk soon, I'm sure.
Great. Thanks so much.
Welcome back. We're here. We just talked to Evan again. Charles got out of his car. What an emotional roller coaster that episode was. But yeah, it was great. It was really, really great. But there's something that we allude to in this half of the episode, and we wanted to just talk about it right now. We want to get out in front of it, and we're talking about Light the Wick. So Charles, you want to talk about this?
Well, you know, we're still figuring out exactly what the format of Light the Wick will be, but I think we're, like you say in this interview, we're going to go main show for this. One way or another, you will be, in the coming months, you will see some Light the Wick action here on Light the Fuse, where we will dip into the John Wick franchise and talk to some people, or at least one person. We'll see. I don't want to give it away, but we're going to do some fun stuff in the coming months.
You don't want to overpromise, Charles? I think we're going to talk to more than one person.
And there's some fun crossover actually between John Wick and Mission Impossible, and I think we're going to be able to get those people on the show as well. So we'll, you know, just buckle your seatbelts and get ready for some Light the Wick in the future, because we got some really exciting, fun stuff coming up for you in that regard.
Can I just say something, Charles? Can I just say something that I forgot to do our sponsors at the beginning of the show? So I got to do it right now. So stop. Just shut up, Charles.
Okay, sorry. All right.
Okay, all right. I just want to tell you that this episode is brought to you by Jeremy Dillon, and to check out his podcast, My Favorite Album. And he has a bunch of amazing musicians, songwriters, and filmmakers on there, including you and I. I mean, he's scraping the bottom of the barrel talking to us, but we got a great episode coming up talking about 007 versus Mission Impossible. And the episode is also brought to you by John B. And additionally, it is brought to you by Real Estate Interest LLC, commercial real estate advice for growing companies. So if you are a company and you just want to consult with them and you're not looking to buy or sell yet, you can just give them a call and they will help you strategize. So just keep that in mind. And oh my God, to get that off my chest, Charles, so glad to have these fine sponsors on board, and I was just sweating it. So just gotta get through that. Okay.
All right. Well, now I wanted to talk about At the Mountains of Madness.
Great.
This was a Guillermo del Toro movie, which I think, as you say in the interview, Guillermo del Toro attaches himself to more projects than anyone.
Yes.
But at one point, he was going to make At the Mountains of Madness, which is a book by H.P. Lovecraft, and it was going to star Tom Cruise. I mean, how close did this movie come to getting made?
I think pretty fucking close. I think that there was some models. Remember when we went to that thing at LACMA?
Yes. All of Guillermo's drawings and stuff?
Yeah, there were some creatures and stuff there from it. So it got pretty close. And Tom actually wrote the intro to a collection of Guillermo del Toro's notebooks. I don't know if you have that book on the shelf or not.
No, but, yeah. Tom Cruise did?
Yeah, Tom Cruise wrote the intro. And he's like, he talks about At the Mountains of Madness. And at the end, he's like, I'm optimistic that we will make it at some point.
Wow.
But it was a hard R sci-fi horror epic. And I'm sure you can find the script if you look hard enough online. It was co-written by Matthew Robbins, who wrote, Dragon Slayer and a bunch of great movies. So, yeah.
Is there any age requirement? Like, can Cruz make this movie in 10 years? Does it matter?
No, I think you can make it in 10 years. Yeah, sure.
All right.
I mean, he doesn't age, so yeah, I think he can continue.
It's true. I also wanted to just talk about, I feel like, I don't know if people know this so much or if they've heard this before, but I think Evan just mentions it in the interview that Chad Stahelski, the director of the John Wick movies, was Keanu Reeves' stunt double.
Yeah.
And that goes back to The Matrix. Is that when that was?
I think so, yeah. You know that when Keanu did the sequels, he basically gave his entire paycheck to the stunt team, which is a story that I love.
Yeah. It's so that's the thing, again, the parallels between John Wick and Mission Impossible. It's also the parallels between Keanu Reeves and Tom Cruise, which we talk a little bit in this interview with Evan, that they are pretty similar in their dedication and their love of film.
Yeah.
Which is really cool.
Yeah. It's very inspiring, but yeah, Evan is the coolest dude, and we've kept in touch with him, obviously, and he will be helping out, and we will be interviewing him for the Light the Wick miniseries too. So if you liked Evan, you're gonna get more of him. If you didn't like Evan, tough shit, he's coming back. So yeah.
I just want to let everybody know they should check out our Patreon again, patreon.com/LightTheFuse. Sign up at the bonus content level. You'll get all kinds of goodies, like our commentaries for all 6 movies and bonus episodes every week. That is a great thing to do. Also, check out our TeePublic page, which is linked from our website, LightTheFusePodcast.com. If you go to the merch section, you will see all of a few of the options, and then you can go to our TeePublic page and buy a shirt or a mask. And the masks, as we've said before, every mask that gets bought from TeePublic, they donate a mask to a hospital, a medical grade mask. And I think so far they said they've donated 650,000 masks, which is pretty amazing. So help them out, help us out. And also cruise around our website. The episode guide that we have up there, we've been updating. It's really cool. You can see all show notes from all our past episodes. If you're catching up to our show for the first time and you're going through older episodes, you can always go check the website and look at the episode and see what kind of fun things we have there to go along with it. Whenever we cite a certain picture or something, we'll be posting those on the website there. So that is, I think, about it for us. I want to give a special thank you to Jacob from Holland, who has been with us for a super long time here on the Patreon, and we love Jacob so much. And also a special thank you to Abby Smith, our intern, who has been such a huge help to us. And this episode is edited and mixed by Luke Burson, so a big thank you to Luke as well.
We have to ask Abby if she's a John Wick fan. We could be pissing off our intern with this whole thing. So
that's a good point. We really need to ask her if this is okay.
But we're going to text her when this is done and just see. Because we could be making a horrible mistake here, Charles, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, I also want to say, though, even though we're going to light the wick, we'll still be lighting the fuse as well. Because, like I said, there's lots of crossover. We're not going to alienate our Mission Impossible fans. Trust us.
No.
We're going to take care of you.
This is a complimentary situation. It's not replacing anything, for sure. So yes, but we're very excited. But I just want to tell everybody too to like, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you're listening to this, and just to tell your friends, bring it up in the next Zoom call you have to have with your awkward coworkers. Just tell them about it. They don't care. What do they care? They'll listen to it maybe. I don't know. So yeah, we just need to get the word out. So yeah, every little bit helps, and we'll be back next week. Who's next week, Charles?
Oh my gosh, we've got a big announcement to make.
Oh,
holy shit.
Wait, I'm glad we saved it for the last 5 seconds when no one is listening to this, but go ahead.
For those of you who stuck around, you're going to get a nice little bonus here, because let me tell you, next week we've got David Koepp coming on the show, screenwriter of the first Mission Impossible movie. So this is one of our best interviews, hands down. He is so funny and so great, and we get so many great nuggets of information about the making of the first mission that I don't think anyone's ever heard before. So this is the next 2 weeks. You're going to have David Koepp, and you're going to be loving it. We loved talking to him. He was so funny and charming.
Yeah, this is one of our favorites so far. I mean, of the entire show, I think he was just a delight, and it's so nice to know that you can have a lot of power and have an amazing filmography and still be like a very wonderful person.
Yeah, he's so humble, and
he was very generous with his time, and we got 2 great full episodes. So yeah, get ready for that.
Yeah, you're going to love that so much. Also, just quickly, I wanted to say follow us on social media. I don't know if maybe you said that already, Drew, but at LightTheFuse-Pod on Instagram and Twitter. We're always doing fun stuff on there that is complementing the show. Abby, our intern, has done an amazing job getting our Instagram up to snuff. So we've got great behind-the-scenes photos and stuff that get shared on there pretty much almost every other day. So you should follow there if you don't already, because it's really awesome stuff.
Yeah. So we'll be back next week. Cap Part 1. It's a humdinger.
Thanks again for listening, everyone. And before we go, another mission, should you choose to accept it. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. And remember that you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at LightTheFusePod and email us questions or comments at lightthefusepodcasts@gmail.com. This message will self-destruct in 5 seconds.